It's really pretty, isn't it, those red bricks? So I must have walked past this street hundreds of times, but I've never looked up the hill and noticed this school. You can just imagine it so clearly. You don't need much of an imagination at all to imagine rows and rows of sort of children in shorts running up the hill. Like, you can really sense the history, and that's what I've noticed about the Colmans, or about the mustard legacy of Norwich. I just feel it in a way that I don't feel other like historical stories. There's some things that really grab you.
My name is John Osborne. I'm a writer and poet and have lived in Norwich for 25 years.
Morning.
Lovely morning.
It's lovely.
But last year, while I was researching for a theatre show I'd written about Norwich, I started to learn about something, and I couldn't stop. The history of Colman's mustard.
And it's not because I do like mustard, but I like it's not something that I would particularly sort of have as one of my sort of characteristics. We'll better get the mustard out because John's coming round. I don't think anyone would say that, although they might do after this. But I just loved the history of it. I just loved that someone decided to mix some mustard seeds together, created something that he thought was good, and because of that, a whole empire has been built.
First tonight, a devastating day for Norwich. The Colman's mustard factory will close after 160 years at the site. Unilever, which owns the
5 years ago, the Colman's factory shut its doors for good.
It's a massive blow for the city to see the iconic brand move out of its base, but a question mark...
I didn't register at the time how big a deal this was. But once I started to learn about the history, suddenly I could see the traces of this mustard legacy everywhere I looked. The factory, the schools, the entire model village which was built for the workers. It felt like there were reminders on every street.
And even the double yellow lines, I know that they're just normal double yellow lines, but they do look Colman's branded. They do look sort of mustardy.
But I'm worried that 5 years after the factory closed, we might be starting to forget.
There's someone over there with yellow shoes. There's a yellow van down there. A bit where they keep the salted over the winter. Mustard yellow. The autumn leaves.
On today's episode of the food programme, I, John Osborne, proud resident of Norwich, will find what is left of Norwich's mustard legacy.
I did think about wearing a bright yellow mustard t-shirt to be on brand.
Why didn't you?
I don't have one. It would have involved going to a shop. There's no sort of celebration of the history. I think that's more than anything, that's what I'm interested in and determined by is let's have a bit of awareness of the story of the Colmans. Norwich is good at celebrating its historical figures, but I want mustard to be celebrated a bit more than it is. There's no Colman statue, there's no blue plaques, there's no... If you go into a primary school in Norwich, I feel like every kid should be able to give you all this information about the Colman family, but I've taught in primary schools in Norwich and I've not heard mustard mentioned once.
In nearly half a century of brilliant programmes, this institution of a Radio 4 series has covered mustard production in glorious detail in the past.
The only spice commonly grown in the UK, which is why hardy, prolific mustard, with its intense yellow flowers, was among the many seeds packed by America's first white settlers when they set out in pursuit of religious freedom from Boston in Lincolnshire in 1620.
Mustard, as both spice and medicine, goes back in time beyond Greek civilization to China and India, where it was being used in 3000 BC.
A lot of what I know about mustard I've learnt from Radio 4.
When the Romans came to Britain, they put it on boiled boar, stuffed udder and green beans. And flowering fields of mustard, bright yellow in June, have been part of the scenery in eastern England since medieval times.
But I knew barely anything about the origins of Colman's and how food has shaped some of the fabric of this city. I wanted to put that right, and the team here at the food programme have agreed to help me.
Mr. Keane was swallowed by Colman, the Norfolk flour miller who started milling mustard in 1814. And in turn, Colmans have merged with Reckitt, famous for their blue dye. Reckitt and Colman have a huge portfolio, but Colmans, to most of us, still means mustard.
So this is Carrow Works, and Carrow Works is the old Colman mustard factory. But as of 2020, it's been, as far as I know, or as far as I've read, completely unused, or mainly unused. There's still signs saying office distribution factory and lots of yellow barriers, and there's a car there. But it's got such an incredible history, it's quite hard to even see through the trees. You can see a bit of a red brick building, but you don't really get a sense of what it was.
For 160 years, mustard was produced at the factory at Carrow Works. It's by one of the main roads that takes you out of Norwich by car, and I'd passed it hundreds of times without ever realising what it was. Now that the factory is empty, there is a security guard in a little hut tasked with keeping curious teenagers at bay. He was leaning out of the window of the security office, watching us.
I feel a little bit like we're being watched.
We assumed he was about to tell us to stop recording, but as it turns out, he is a fellow Colman's history buff. And he spent the past 5 years in this office discovering the amazing history of how mustard helped make Norwich, in between chasing teenagers off the site, of course. He'd spent much of his life in Norwich, but like me, didn't know much about this brilliant history until he looked into it himself. And now he's even started collecting old company magazines from eBay to help his research.
It's exactly what you just said. As soon as I started to read about it, I thought, I'd quite like to keep learning more about these people.
It was like meeting someone who has been waiting for years for someone to come and ask, "Tell me everything you know."
Right, okay,
Wow.
I hadn't even known that this was the factory. Why is there so little signposting to tell people what happened here?
Sort of reminds you of how brilliant it is doing research and just asking such a simple question. God, do you know
Why are people like me and the security guard having to do our own research?
And it was interesting that he was exactly the same as me, in that he knew nothing about the history of Colman's, started to dig around a little bit and couldn't really stop.
Just across the railway bridge from the factory is Trowse, an entire village built by the Colman family, one of the earliest model villages, dating back to the 1870s. My friend Marion lives here, and she offered to show us around.
For Colman's. And Colman's moved here from Stoke Holy Cross in the I think it was 1865 or something.
She's one of those people who takes great interest in the world around her. The first thing I did when I knew I was making an episode of the food programme about mustard was to get in touch with Marion.
Actually. But there was a younger Jeremiah Colman, so he took over the business, and he was quite innovative, and he worked out that the strongest flow of the river was just down here, but he moved the business to here to sort of take advantage of this sort of faster milling.
There were so many clever decisions like that that were made that would have such massive repercussions or advantages.
And then they built Trowse, they built terraces of houses, they built a school, there was a chapel, they set up sports clubs and ran a football club because they believed in cradle-to-grave care, so that you had, for education from being a young child, you had nursing and maternity care if you were, having children, so that all the way through they were, and that's what people who live in Trowse and the records of people who live in Trowse say, that it was a great company to work for.
This is the way the workers would have walked from their homes, the homes that Colman's mustard built for them, to their factory. It's where the children would have walked to school. I could imagine an L.S. Lowry painting, mustard yellow matchstick men walking to the factory.
It was a sort of bit bittersweet, I think, the kind of paternalistic looking after of the workers, but it was also overseeing them quite a lot.
There was an entire empire within that factory, and this is the routes they'd have walked.
So outside the Church of St Andrew in Trowse, it says, "Welcome to our prayer walk. Enjoy some spiritual refreshment and mindfulness as you follow the pathways around the 12 stations. You may find it helpful to photograph the map below." So they've got a prayer walk, and I just thought other cities and other towns, when they have something of historical and cultural significance, you let people know about it. So in the same way that the Church of St Andrew have given people these markers of where is interesting to pray, why does Norwich not have a Colman's walk? We're told that a lot of the doors were painted in Colman's mustard yellow to be sort of iconic and on brand. So when I came here for the first time, I was really hoping to see lots of mustard yellow doors, but I think we've seen one, and that might just be a yellow door.
The mustard yellow doors have been repainted, or maybe they never existed at all. Even the famous mustard shop in town is gone.
Because I used to go to it every December to get presents for my dad.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know exactly when the mustard shop went. Kind of just disappeared without a big flag waving.
Where are the plaques? Where are the guided tours? And what happened to our shop?
And I think when the factory closed, Stephen Fry said, you can't imagine Stratford without Shakespeare, and you can't imagine Norwich without Colman's, but it has gradually kind of seeped away. People aren't really aware of the history of Colman's in particular.
My name is Hannah Henderson, and I am the curator here at the Museum of Norwich, which is a social history museum in the centre of our city, which tells the story of Norwich and its people.
It's a beautiful museum as well.
Thank you.
I really like it. Hannah Henderson is a curator at the Norwich Museum, where the famous old mustard shop used to be.
And so even now, people still wander into the museum looking for they're a bit disappointed that the mustard shop is no longer on the alley. When people remember, they have nostalgia about working there, they have nostalgia about the brand, but they also remember coming with their mum into the mustard shop to buy something for Aunt Jenny because she'd moved to Sydney. So there's all these sort of family memories embedded in this firm, really, and people's interaction with it.
Today, Hannah's busy trying to solve this problem of Norwich's disappearing mustard legacy.
I was talking to a gentleman, John, who was also called John, this morning, because it's our Heritage Open Days, so the museum is open for free today. I was chatting to an older gentleman, I hope he doesn't mind me saying that, but he was saying that he had memories of his family talking about how they were domestic servants and gardeners for one of their big houses just on the outskirts of the city. And when one of the children was poorly, they sent a chauffeur-driven car to come and collect that child after they'd been to the hospital, and all the nurses were like, "Oh, who do you think you are?" They really did say that they operated from cradle to grave, and they set up baby teas, they supported their workers from early infancy, but then also there was a coffin book that still survives, that the worker that was now deceased was registered, as was the type of coffin that they had that was provided for them. And if you were a little bit further up the tree, you had a bit of a fancier coffin, but nevertheless. So they were amazing. Certainly there were sort of 4 generations of the Colman's family that really drove the business on. So they were committed Baptists, and they were devoted to the principles of hard work and social usefulness as a means to achieve a happy and a fulfilled life. So they were productive, but they also really cared about the wider implications of how people lived and worked, which actually, when you know a bit more, you see evidence of all around our cities. And I agree, John, that certainly I think this is a story that we need to unpick more. And it's certainly something over the past couple of years we've been doing in partnership with Unilever and their archive there to try and work out how we can tell this story better.
You said there were kind of four
Yes.
kind of groups, four people. There was Jeremiah, and then there was Jeremiah James. No, there was Jeremiah, and then there was James, and then there was Jeremiah James. Tell us more about
Yeah, and then
those.
later as well. But certainly it's JJ, as we call him, JJ Colman, who is the driving force, really, from what we understand of Colman's now.
Jeremiah James Colman was the great-nephew of the original founder, Jeremiah Colman, who founded the Carrow Works in Norwich and took the company from a single mill to a works employing over 3,000 people. And it was Jeremiah James Colman who famously said, "I make my money from the mustard that people leave on the side of their plates."
And interestingly, the more we've looked into it, I've begun to realise, and we've begun to realise as a team, that it wasn't just JJ, it was also Caroline, his wife. And the pair of them were so dynamic. They were extraordinary, really. They put their money where their mouth was and they rolled their sleeves up. And certainly, whilst I think JJ gets lots of credit, quite rightly, for leading the company and instigating driving the company forward, but instigating so many worker-friendly practices, which were really leading the field. They were kind of involved in all levels of trying to improve the workers' lives and their families' lives. So they set up day schools, Sunday schools. Caroline oversaw both those schools, but the Carrow Works kitchen, and they set up a home for girls, which essentially was accommodation for young female workers who otherwise would have been quite vulnerable. And they set up all other kind of sort of welfare schemes to help their workers. They developed early pension schemes. They were pioneering in establishing one of the first industrial nurses. So they were amazing. So JJ gets some credit, lots of credit usually, but I think he deserves to share that credit, I think, with Caroline.
Yeah, I agree. It was researching the Colmans. Caroline was the name that jumped out at me. She was the person who initiated the hot meals for the Colmans workers, stew and coffee, and it just feels like working early in the morning or late at night at a factory in the 1800s, and suddenly there's stew provided for you at work. That you can feel the warmth in your stomach.
I think that's exactly right. And again, this idea of supporting your workers they have this idea of betterment. So again, food is essential, isn't it, in terms of creating people that have good well-being, but are also able to work well. I like the thought that they're making products to feed people whilst feeding their own work as well.
As far as I know, there's no statue, there's no plaque, there's no anything for Jeremiah or Jeremiah James or Caroline.
I think that's a really good point, actually, John. Maybe that's something we could do together in the future. Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's hold that thought. Yeah.
Hannah agreed with me that we need to do more, but she also said that this history is visible today in ways beyond plaques or statues.
Efficiency of the on-site production is flabbergasting for some of these firms. And Colman's is a really good example of that, to the point that they were developing and sort of breeding sort of silkworms to produce silk, to create the fine mesh of their sieves, because they were so renowned for super milling and sieving their very, very fine powdered mustard. I mean, it's fascinating. They were making their own tins. They were kind of creating their own packaging. And that department was powered mostly by women and adolescents. And that was hard work. It was dangerous, sharp, heavy, hard work. So, I think 90% of the sort of manufacturing element, certainly in terms of the mustard, was seemingly, from my research, looks like it was male. But actually, in terms of like making the tins. So again, I'll pick up a tin. It didn't even dawn on me. But actually it will now. And I'll really look at how that's made and think about how those people that lived around those factories, you know, really were part of a massive team that created a brand and created a taste. We can have that experience still, that sensory experience. We know what that they were producing and we can taste it now and enjoy it now. So that's kind of a living legacy, really, isn't it? It's hard. There's not many things that you can talk about in history where you can still have that immediate physical sensory response to what people were making. And people, whether people love it or hate it. I'm not really a big mustard fan. I probably should have said that to begin with.
A legacy and a flavour so strong it's travelled the world.
Colman's mustard, original English. And I want to compare it to Chestnut Hill's yellow mustard. Y'all told me it's a big difference between the two.
A flavour so strong there's an entire genre of YouTube videos devoted to Americans trying Colman's mustard for the first time.
All right, I'll just go like this. Pause. Whoa. Oh my God.
How could we let such a potent substance just disappear from our city?
Hey. What going on, y'all?
Why haven't we been prouder of our little pots of yellow mustard?
I almost threw up. What is this? What do you put that on? What does that go on?
If you're having mustard in a sandwich, would you go for Dijon, English mustard?
I think it depends on the flavour of the day. If I'm feeling, a little bit spicy, I might go for, the traditional hot yellow mustards. If I'm feeling a little bit more tame, I'll go for a bit of a whole grain.
Sam Brown is a chef. We met at his brewery next to the railway line, which used to carry mustard products in and out of the city.
You probably hear a few going past, and that was, the train track that would have taken goods to, the Colman's factory way back when.
I've come to see him to exchange mustard memories, because Sam has been involved in a very tangible way in trying to keep mustard making here.
I remember it really clearly, funnily enough. I used to live in my second year of university. I lived on Adelaide Street in Norwich, which is next to kind of the most famous pub in Norwich, or the most famous real ale pub in Norwich, which is the Fat Cat. And both of my housemates were big real ale drinkers, and I quickly became a real ale drinker. And I went in there one day because I had an essay to write or some university work to do, and I knew that they showed the cricket on their little telly in the corner. So it was like 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, and I walked in with my notebook, knowing the cricket was on, and I thought I'll have a few beers, do my university work, watch the cricket, and I'll be happy. And there was pork pies on the counter, and so I had a couple of beers and I thought, I'm going to have a pork pie, and it just came with this huge with the tin, and there was a huge dollop of mustard on the side of the plate, and cut up my pork pie, dipped it into the mustard, and that combined with the real ale, it was one of the real special moments of just thinking this is really, and I guess with the cricket on as well, and me with my notebook, it was almost like this is my happy place. A very quiet pub because it was a weekday afternoon, and it felt like I'd discovered something. It was that combination of all of those things. It's almost like that condiment was put all of those things together.
I think I can't exactly recall it in as much detail as John, but my granddad, he's a great fella. Love him to absolute bits, but he's always been a bit of a joker. Would kind of wake you up if you were napping when he shouldn't be, with like smelling salts and that kind of thing. So I'm very, very sure, and I do have vague recollections of my granddad, feeding me Colman's mustard out of sheer entertainment when I was a lot younger, I believe, definitely.
And that's turned you into the person you are today.
Yeah, exactly. Hardens, yeah. I've struggled to do like spicy foods, chilies and curries, etc. However, I can do like sort of the black pepper and the mustard, so I do think that's, it's nice for me to be able to have that little bit of spice in my life.
Have you had Senf, the German mustard?
I haven't, no.
It blew. So the first time I lived in Germany for a year when I was 20, and they said you've got to try a bratwurst with Senf. It's your first week in Germany. And so I thought, well, I'll do what they tell me to do. I'd never experienced a sensation like it. And it's sort of coming out of your eyes and steam coming out of your ears. And it was almost quite addictive because I hated it. I was like... And suddenly I thought, I'm just going to have another big bite full of this now.
And Mr. Colman always did say that he made his money from the mustard that was left on the side of the plate.
Yeah.
But I do think, John, you're right. It is kind of quite an addictive, fiery taste, isn't it? And I do think once people get that used to it, it's kind of very difficult, I think, not to be able to appease that.
Yeah, it's making me hungry.
5 years ago, when Unilever announced the Carrow Works factory was closing, Sam and a team of fellow Norwich mustard enthusiasts came up with a radical plan.
Robert, can you give me a sense of what Colman's has meant? How important has Colman's been to Norwich?
I guess it's always been there. It's never been high profile, but it's always been in the city. So people have always known of Colman's, and they always know of the Colman family and of Colman's mustard, and we all obviously eat Colman's mustard with our meat. So if people are concerned about Colman's leaving Norwich, let's do something positive and create a new mustard brand that stays in Norwich forever.
It was done in a way where it was we tried to get crowdfunding, which we did successfully get crowdfunding, and that's also with that ethos why we originally came up with the first two different style mustards, just mainly to be different from Colman's. They're a massive conglomerate, and we knew that we can directly compete with them in terms of commercial sort of viability.
And I think this is why it was very popular on crowdfunding. It just has exactly the spirit that people love, which is something's happening, we are being denied as something that we love is being removed from Norwich, but we're going to do something, we're going to build something positive.
Yeah, that's exactly it. We were trying to achieve that maintaining of mustard production and the heritage of it in Norwich, and I actually knocked myself out when we were doing the Dijon mustards because it was so potent.
Wow.
So I literally poured a 20 kilo tub into a container and I passed out.
Wow.
So it was that strong.
Imagine even one jar is quite strong.
Exactly that. So you put that into 20 kilo concentration.
Fumes.
And like you said earlier, John, it literally just eats your eyes and streams all fluids out of places where you didn't realise fluid could come out of.
It was audacious and hopeful. But 5 years on, sadly, you don't see Norwich mustard on the shelves.
We did get to a point of selling a good considerable amount of mustards. However, I think the organisational structure of the company wasn't quite right for the business that it was trying to be. I purchased the brand rights, so we still have that in a little chest that potentially, even maybe after this, it sort of sparks a relaunch of the brand, because we really would like to get it off the ground again. It was a fabulous product, super tasty. The branding was very on point with the heritage of Norwich. It is a shame that it's been a huge part of the heritage of Norwich. It's almost like a bit of a hidden secret. I don't think I can recall being taught anything at school regarding the Colman family.
Good. They're so important.
Yeah.
They're so important.
So, all is lost. Colman's is gone from Norwich. 200 years of history. 160 years of mustard production in the factory. Norwich mustard had been a brilliant idea, which, like most brilliant ideas, hasn't quite come to fruition. What's left to do except wander the streets, searching for mustard-coloured front doors?
That is our first yellow door, number 78. Not quite mustard yellow, but yellowy enough.
Except, maybe not.
It's exactly what I thought it would be.
In a large warehouse just outside Norwich.
Brand new, shiny block of warehouses and offices.
On a road called Colman's Close, we found our way in through a door to a stairwell with a cabinet full of Colman's paraphernalia and a strong smell of mint. A man called Simon came to greet us. Like most people in this building, he used to work at Colman's.
So which was the majority of us who came here to start with. We all came from there.
But this is not Colman's. This is a company called Condimentum, and it opened exactly when Colman's shut down.
So, best place I've ever worked. I'm 54, so I've worked since I was 16. It's the best place I've ever worked.
And the story of what happened here is pretty remarkable.
As a family, and we take pride in what we do.
So Jeremiah Colman would be proud.
He certainly would be, mate. Yeah, he certainly would be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's good that we're keeping it in Norfolk.
Yeah.
So, because Colman's of Norwich is a iconic brand.
It is.
And and that's just good. And everybody feels part of the company. We want to do our best.
Which is what you read about from the history of Colman's, is that's what the workers felt like in the 1850s.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, all part of being a family.
I was given a safety hat and white factory overalls and taken on a tour of the production line, where thousands of Colman's tins were traversing their way around a conveyor belt, being filled with mustard.
If Colman's have left Norwich, then I don't know what's happening in this factory.
I wasn't entirely sure what was going on. This looked like the entire world supply of mustard, all under one roof.
This is just providing mustard for the country, for the whole of Europe.
This isn't why we started to make this show. We thought Colman's had left Norwich.
We weren't lying when we said Colman's haven't left Norwich.
Greg Bliss's family have been growing mustard for generations.
Yeah, how far back does your connection with Colman's go? Or how far back does your connection with mustard go?
Well, four generations of the Bliss family who farmed have grown for Colman's. Originally, my great-grandfather, Grandad used to tell me, Grandad was a cigar smoker. I think it was because, as a young man, his Grandad had taken his samples to Jeremiah Colman, who sat in his desk with the bit clipped out the front so he could get his corpulent size behind the desk and check Grandad's samples, and if he was happy with it, he'd shake your hand and give you a cigar. And I don't think great-Grandad smoked them, but I think other Grandad did, and he carried on for the rest of his life. So there we go. I think that was, he gave you a cigar as a sign that your mustard was up to snuff, and he would take it.
J.J. Colman himself. A man of such stable stature, he needed a groove carved from the table to make way for his ample belly. An image of a man as stable as the flavour of mustard itself, perhaps. This is the sort of family connection which isn't uncommon for farmers around here. Sheila Dillon actually met Greg in 2012 for this very programme. Back then, the farmers had just formed a cooperative to protect the future of the seed.
2007, rotten harvest. So you decide to get together.
We feel the brand's actually part of our makeup, and it seemed stupid to just throw it away. But obviously we had to come at it in a different way, and we couldn't do that on our own.
And so when the farmers realised the Colman's factory was closing down, they decided to take matters into their own hands. They built their own mill to take over when Unilever pulled the plug on Carrow Works.
We'd always said to Unilever that, emotionally, the growers always felt they owned the brand, but it was an emotional own rather than a physical own. So we'd had quite a lot of thought about what might happen, and we'd sketched out some ideas. And once the hair was sort of running with the chance that Unilever had come out of the factory, we sort of drilled down and worked really hard to look at what we could do to secure mustard growing in the UK going forward, because if the factory goes, what's going to happen? So in Boris Johnson words, we had an oven-ready plan, more or less, and when Unilever said, they announced the closure, it swung into action with our plan really drilled down and got it finessed so that we took it to Unilever and said, if you want to carry on producing mustard, they were in a position where they knew they were going to close the factory and obviously didn't really have a plan to do anything else. They'd probably have bought mustard flour from somewhere else, which would have destroyed our businesses for whatever. So we engaged with Unilever, and they did engage, and basically, at the end of the day, they stock built while the factory was opening, while we built this factory in 2018-19, I think, yeah. And the money to build the factory was raised predominantly through the growers of mustard with some wealthy other individuals. And I mean, it was Dave Martin, who was our CEO, who built the factory, did a fantastic job in getting the factory up and running in really next to no time. It was a miracle considering what was going to happen with the COVID years coming forward. We'd got the factory built and up and running. So by the time Unilever had run out of their stock build, we were able to mill mustard in this facility, and Unilever put their tinning line in our facility here, and we were filling their tins. So it was almost seamless. I mean, as an operation, building a factory and getting it running, I don't think you could have got it any better. And you talk to anybody who works here, and you've only got to look at the facility we're standing in. It's a fantastic bit of work. Fantastic.
Well, because you all got together and said, we have to deal with something. How are we going to deal with it? And you all pulled together and made something special.
This is the thing. I think there was a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth, and mustard's gone away. Yes, we send mustard flour to Burton for them to make the wet mustard, but actually mustard's milled and lives in Norwich all the time. All the tins are filled here. All the flour that goes into the wet mustard that goes up to Burton is milled here. So we need to shout a bit more about what we've achieved. We don't have a big sign saying Colman's of Norwich on the factory, because we're not Colman's, we're not Unilever, but we're hugely proud to work for Unilever, but actually for the Colman's brand, because like I said earlier, emotionally, most of the growers, everyone says, would you grow? I grow my mustard for Colman's. They don't, that's still something that the growers still say. I will keep trying to say they grow it for Condimentum. Begins with a C anyway.
Condimentum now mills all the seeds for Colman's mustard, just like before. But now the local farmers aren't just contracted to Colman's. They're able to sell all over the world. And now all over this building, from the Chief Financial Officer Stuart, who left school at 18 and started his accountancy training at Colman's, to the workers across the factory floor, the mustard legacy of Norwich looks alive and well.
I do remember turning up at Colman's as an 18-year-old, just under A-levels, not quite certain what a management accountant actually did. I was pointed to that job by, I think, my grandmother, who phoned me up and said, look, Colman's are advertising for people. They're a really good place to go and work.
Yeah.
If I hadn't had that phone call, I'd have probably become a quantity surveyor or something similar. So to have got to this point in my career and had the opportunity to come back and, look after the next iteration of the milling was an opportunity I couldn't say no to. Virtually all the people that came across, on day one came from Unilever and cared deeply about the Colman's brand. And that's what got us through. For the first few weeks of mums, we were knee-deep in mustard flour sometimes, trying to get the mill to work. So this is the control room for the mill. Hello. This is Sean. You were one of the first, weren't you?
After 10 years at Colman's. I was sad, because I was really happy at the place. I just got the role I wanted. I was a team leader. Everything was running. We were just banging out product like crazy, absolutely crazy. And then when they said they were closing, that was like, oh, what now? Like, I was then already thinking about next stages, where to go. I was thinking about truck driving and all that sort of thing. And then luckily this came up, and I've now worked my way up to being a team leader here. Same thing I've done at Colman's. I'm running the team, and we're like driving obviously to get the yield out, get the product out, get the plan out, and yeah, it's really good.
There is something about a pot of mustard. There is a certainty about mustard.
Do you like mustard? No. not the taste of it. Not the taste of it. I make it, I don't eat it. That's
a good answer.
Yeah. That's an honest answer.
The unambiguity of a hot mouth. The friendship of a favourite condiment. I still think Norwich needs to tell the story of Colman's better. But talking to the people I met on my day exploring mustard in Norwich, knowing that mustard is still alive and well, has made me feel genuinely proud. From Sam the chef's passion for Norwich mustard, Hannah at the museum working on the archive, and the genuine love in the condimentum factory.
Which is again the fascination of the history of Jeremiah, of just how business was run back then. The industrialists, they knew how to look after their workers, they wanted to look after their workers. There was this sort of group spirit. There really seemed to be this sense of
I think it's still
pride.
about.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. He looked after his workforce and they wanted to work for him and they were proud in what they produced. And it's no different here today. We as growers are proud to produce for Condimentum. We're immensely proud to have made the investment into Condimentum, what we've done, and the guys and girls that work here are just the same. They're proud of what they do, and I still have to pinch myself quietly that we are where we are.
And there's that beautiful photo that's next to us right now of all of the work is all here, and it just looks like it never left.
No, it's still here. It is very much still here.